Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. Bob West had a thriving career as an architect in the Denver area, but he also had one boot in the cowboying life. Well, as things go and things change, both boots ended up on a ranch. The author of 20 Miles of Fence, Blueprint of a Cowboy, Bob joins Russell and Alan to talk about how he became a full-time cowboy, rancher, and business owner.
Morning, Alan. Good to see you.
It's been a little while, so it's great to be back here. I love this place. You know, I love White Stallion Ranch and love sitting right here.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Although I like to be other places once in a while. We were up at OTO for a while, and just for a few days. But talking about ranches, I think one of the many things we share is a lot of fun touring ranches, buying them, in your case, managing them. In my case, my wife and son and daughter-in-law manage our cattle ranches.
I have no idea why there's such an attraction to me, but I love looking at ranches. I love being down on my hands and knees and looking at the grass. I just love the feeling of what a ranch is. And just consider myself lucky that I've been able to do a lot of that in my life.
Well, I agree. You've done it more than me, but the aura of a Western ranch is hard to beat.
I can't really describe it, but it is. I get there and I just feel like I won't call it home, but I feel like I'm where I belong.
Yep.
And
that speaks to Mustang Meadows. You didn't even want to buy it.
Yeah. It bought me.
Well, that was my parents. They'd say, "Oh, do you own this ranch?" And they go, "Oh, no, it owns me." So anyway, joining us today is, of course, someone who shares that understanding of the lure of ranches. He's a third generation Coloradan. I would have been third generation if my parents hadn't moved me to Arizona at 5. I was born in Denver. Bob West is an award-winning architect, 35 years of design and architectural firm management experience behind him. He retired in 2015 from OZ Architecture, one of Colorado's most prestigious architectural firms. Also now an accomplished cattle rancher and cowboy, and he's raising those really sort of, what would you call them, iconic Scottish Highlander cattle. My English daughter-in-law loves Scottish Highland cattle. And this is on his northern Colorado ranch, and he's also the author of 20 Miles of Fence, Blueprint of a Cowboy. Great to have you, Bob.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, you were humming away as a successful architect. What changed your course and put you in ranching and where you're going now?
Well, this book kind of tells the beginning of the changes in my life, which brought about a complete transition from being an architect to now being a cowboy rancher full-time in Livermore, Colorado. The book is actually about a ranch that we bought in Wheatland, Wyoming. And the changes in the architectural profession from when I started in 1979 to 2015 were pretty great, like life is. Lots of lawyers came into the business on the not so fun side. Technology took over. I really liked to hand draw when I started architecture. I thought that was the artistic part of architecture, was the blueprints. And, it turned into full-on computer drafting by the time I retired. We had 275 employees at the height of the firm. And it turned out that a lot of my time was spent managing people rather than doing architecture. So that really kind of explains a little bit about that. We actually, we'll talk about it, but we actually ended up buying a 3,800 acre cattle ranch in Wyoming with absolutely no experience in cattle.
You just wanted to get away from architecture for a while? You too many people there, or what?
Well, I was still in the firm, and 1993, my family, I had 3 boys. I was living east of Boulder on a ranchette with 2 horses in the backyard, and they didn't see me except for on TV very much during the week getting projects approved at some city council. and Nintendo, if you know what that is, the game deal came out, and the boys were fixated 24/7 on that crazy television playing those games. And my wife and I said, hey, we've got to break out of here, get out of the Front Range hassle and find a place to go. We didn't want to go to the typical ski condo because you have to travel up I-70. Even back in 1995, that was a pain. So we wanted to look at properties, and we ended up spending quite a long time, 2 years, and we didn't ever expect to own a cattle ranch.
Well, it's kind of like, my parents were from Denver and they wanted warm weather, and they have no preconceived idea of a dude ranch, and it just happened. And with my mom kicking and screaming. But so that's kind of how it happened for you. It just happened.
The ranch found you. You didn't find it. Is that what you might say?
Yes. It was quite a process. We started in 1993. We probably looked at over 20 different ranches. We had 2 of them under contract that fell through for different reasons. One of them was interesting. It was up by Laramie, Wyoming. Our deal was we wanted it within 2 to 3 hours travel time so that we could get up on the weekends and get back to work. And my wife called me. We had this ranch on the Laramie River west of the town of Laramie, under contract, ready to buy. My wife called me in a panic the week before we were to close to come up, and I said, is everything okay? She said, yes, but you need to come up right now. I walked out of a meeting, drove up, and I was rounding the last corner to the ranch, and there was a dark brown horse, and all of a sudden it shook, and it was a gray horse. Mosquitoes.
Oh, wow.
Millions of mosquitoes.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
And so she met me with full mosquito regalia that the realtor had given her.
And that was the panic call, was a mosquito call.
Yeah, so we decided that wasn't in the cards for us. So we ended up going up north into Wyoming, and we about gave up. And our realtor said there was a ranch in Wheatland, Wyoming. The owner was about 75 years old. He had just had a heart attack. He had no kids. He had 2 kids, but they didn't want the ranch. So he was considering selling, and we ended up driving into that ranch. It was a little bit rough, kind of tundra area, but then we dropped into the canyon well into the ranch, and it was incredible. The North Fork of the Laramie River ran through it, 2.5 miles. Spectacular property.
My cousins have a ranch in that general area, and I think they're on the Laramie River also. And it's one of my favorite places in all the West. It's an old ranch called the Double Four. So how'd you pick Highland cattle?
Well, that ranch was Angus, and it was a 150 cow-calf operation. And so we were 10 years in running that ranch. I don't really want to get into why I did not end up with that ranch, because that'll ruin the book for anybody that's going to buy it. So you'll have to buy the book to understand that.
Perfect.
But now I'm up in Livermore, Colorado, on a much smaller ranch, and just love Scottish Highlands. They're we call them hairy hippie cows.
Yeah.
And they're very popular right now, which is good for the business. And we actually bought them for yard ornaments just to get agricultural zoning contained up there, and ended up getting into the business big time.
And why are people loving them?
They're very, very smart, incredibly smart. They are great, easy keepers, about 99% non-assist calving. They're almost pet-like animals. You know, they're bred in Scotland to be around the homes in Scotland. And just quite different than any other cow breed I've ever been around. Really interesting animals, great beef, really good and healthful beef.
And so some parallel, of course, for anybody who's never seen a Scottish Highland, they're really long-haired and shaggy and don't look like any other cattle breed that I'm aware of. I don't, but we raise Criollo, which are Spanish cattle, which look like Corrientes. Some people say they're just Corrientes, and they also have that 99 plus natural calf birth, and they're really frugal and they range and then go 2, even sometimes 3 days without water. So they're really desert adapted Spanish cattle, and they come off the range tender, and that makes them, you know, that's a very good attribute and a big game changer. And I've heard some of the same things. I mean, English cattle, but Highland have a lot of those attributes, right?
Yes, they do. They're browsers, so they'll eat about anything, which, you know, usually you look for fat, obviously, for flavor in beef. And, of course, with their big hairy coats, they're sort of like buffalo. They're very low in fat, so you'd think that they would lose flavor. But what happens is, since they're browsers, they'll eat about anything. Yucca, they'll eat bark off of trees. They'll actually clear your fields. And so that gets put into their meat. So they have just a little bit of a wild flavor tinge to it. And so that makes up for the lack of fat. So it's really wonderful beef.
Do you look for a colder climate with all that hair on them? Do they need how are they in hot weather?
They are in the south, certainly not as many as in the northern part. But as long as they have water to get into, if there's a pond or something like that, they do just fine down in Texas and in Oklahoma. And there's even some in Alabama, even some in Florida. But they have to be able to get into water if they're in really warm places.
Yeah, we had 2 years ago. They were kind of the rest of our cattle were Longhorns, but they were kind of lawn ornaments, like you said. It was just the novelty, and they did okay. I mean, they aged out. They did all right. Do you take your beef to retail?
I do. I have a license to sell by the piece, and I also run the Forks Mercantile and Saloon, which I'm talking from today, which is a Cowboy bar and mercantile gas station near Livermore, Colorado, near my ranch, and I sell there. It's hard to get Highland beef. About the only place is a farmer's market. I've never seen it in a supermarket. And so it's pretty desirable. I sell quite a bit of beef right out of the store.
You kill them right off the range, or do you have a feedlot, or how do you prepare them for your customers?
All grass fed, and then I take them to a USDA butcher.
That's nearby, that does custom kill for you?
Yeah, we have several in the Front Range, and I also go to Craig, Colorado, because I really like what they do.
Wow. So you don't have a problem with the processing aspect?
No.
Wow. You're the first person I've talked to in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to travel. I mean, I have a processor in Laramie that's no more than 20 minutes from me. They're booked out for 8 months.
Yeah.
And that's hard to figure because you don't know what your steer's going to look like at that point. And so I end up driving, 3.5 hours to Craig a lot because I really like them. They'll put me in at any time. So it's not perfect, but it works.
Well, that's what we're looking at.
You kill one or two at a time, or 4 or 5, or what? None of my business, but just wondered how you do with the volume.
Yeah, I do 1 or 2 at a time and try to spread it out.
And what with the Highline cattle? What's your rough target age for processing?
They have to be 2.5 years to 3 is the sweet spot. That's the only negative about Highland cattle is they grow up slowly. Yeah,
well, that is exactly the target for the Criollo. I suspect, even though they have very different heritages, there's some commonality because that's the 30 to 33 plus months is the zone for them also, and we're going to have to start driving too because we can't get any, and a lot of it isn't inspected and you can't sell it, it's not inspected. So processing's a nightmare.
We're going to have to take a break right now, but we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Stan Husted, and I'm the leader of What It Takes Radio, a podcast and publishing company, and I'm one of the founders of the Cowboy Up podcast. Russell and Alan have had a long career. They've been ranchers, literally, all their lives. And obviously that has led to them knowing a great deal about horses and, indeed, the Western and cowboy experience. They've lived that life, all of the stars and scars that go with it, and they've done very well. Even in the midst of that, both of them have become writers, and both Alan and Russell have written some books about their life and about the ranching experience. But they never thought that they would be broadcasters. That's right. And when I suggested it, they said, well, we don't know. And as Russell sometimes says, I agreed to it just so Stan would quit nagging me about it. Well, they're now in their 4th year, and they're having a whole lot of fun, making a whole lot of new friends, enjoying it immensely, and doing good work. They truly are radio broadcasters, and it builds a good life for them and helps their businesses to thrive and prosper. Now, what about you? You've probably never thought that would be a possibility. But indeed it can be, and that's the business I'm in. I'm not in the business of helping big, successful media companies make more money. I'm in the business of helping people like you who own small businesses, small organizations, particularly nonprofit and goodwill organizations, to use the power of the modern media called podcasting and combining it with the power of the written word, publishing. What It Takes Radio, we teach you how to do what it takes to truly be a world-class broadcaster. Let me help you do that, or at least think about it as we come to the end of 23 and as we pursue a hopeful, better future for you and me. Reach out to me at stan@witradio.net. That's Stan, S-T-A-N, at witradio.net. And let's get you behind the mic, maybe in front of the camera, so you can tell your story to the world. And now back to that fine program.
Well, so what was your first roundup like? When you took over, when you bought, how did you get your feet on the ground and fire out?
Well, I kind of say that the book is sort of like Yellowstone meets City Slickers. And part of the interesting part about the book is it's not your typical macho Western. I was extremely honest about all the mistakes that we made along the way, which were many. And I think the first roundup was incredible because I brought up a bunch of architects about my age at that point. I was 40 when we bought the ranch. They were in their probably early 30s, and we have a chapter called The Boys from Boulder, and it talks about branding with Wheatland cowboys. You know, I call them professional cowboys versus the rookies up from Boulder that never had touched a cow. And of course we rope and drug, and just watching how good not only the cowboys but their wives were at wrestling calves and, you know, doing everything that needs to be done in a branding, where we're just learning the process. It was a crazy time. I watched many of my architectural cohorts doing helicopter spins on top of a 300-pound calf. And they loved it.
Those of us that have been in the business, we've seen that 100 times, and it's always entertaining.
Well, I was just going to say, but they loved it. You know, we at our little Tombstone Ranch, we do roundups just like every ranch, but because we're in the tourism business, we're dude ranching business, we have guests, 12 to 15 come and join us. And, you know, some like to just kind of move cows and watch, and, you know, if they're up for it, some get to brand. And 2 roundups ago, there's one woman that looked in her 50s. She would hit the calves harder than anybody I've ever seen. Those cattle would land splat. And I asked somebody, I said, what does she do for a living? They said, oh, she's a prison guard. This is practice. So I tell you, her prisoners better behave, but it's interesting. I mean, that's kind of what you were doing, right? You had some day cowboys, pros, and you guys were the Boulder bunch. They were learning.
Right. Hey, I have this, I'll read you something real quickly. I did this for a book signing, trying to explain what it was like to the audience. Sunday morning horseback ride at sunrise on a perfectly trained cutting horse. No sounds but birds, and the breathing of the animal below you, puffing air from its nostrils, reflecting the mist off the early morning sun. The prairie grass below, intricate colors and detail of wildflowers and occasional cactus. A lone coyote off in the careful distance, shadowing your every move. Then your horse sees the morning target. His ears go back and you're off, just holding on with dear life. It's roundup time.
Perfect.
And that's not even in the book. That's just explaining to an audience, you know, the incredible feeling you had when that isn't your normal daily life on the prairie in Wyoming in a spectacular ranch.
Well, a good horse has, I wouldn't call it 2 speeds, but normal life, you're on them and you're riding. And if they're a good cow horse, when you get around cattle, they just shift gears, you know, and they just all of a sudden move differently, and they're more aware, and it's just fun to be sitting on them because life changes right then.
That's right.
Well, so Bob, I have I'm part of a little company that owns and operates dude ranches that aren't the one here, White Stallion. There are other ones, and we're in Arizona and Montana. And my partner, who's really the CEO, de facto such, we're the managing partners. He's a former architect, and I wanted to be an architect as a kid, and I realized that I wasn't artistic or creative enough to be a good one, because it's really art applied to design of buildings, and in my view. And I see a lot of former architects. You're one of them. But I have a note that your team, your wife Katie, and friend Tucker, developed a loft project in the is it just Lodo neighborhood in downtown Denver?
Yes, the old historic Lodo neighborhood. Yes. And
my parents would have known, of course, because my mom was a lifetime Denverite. But did you apply some of the architecture at the ranch? Did you do some projects that?
We did, yes. I couldn't help myself. I had to do a master plan, and we ended up building or remodeling 3 different cabins. We built a lot of barns for new tractors and things. But the first thing I built, to the consternation of the rancher that stayed on the ranch, thank goodness, for a year and taught us how to ranch, was a drinking deck on the fishing cabin, which overlooked the river. And of course, he wanted, all this improvement that he could never afford. And we built a drinking deck, and you could sit out there and watch satellites at 2 a.m. And it was really incredible looking down over the river.
Every successful ranch needs a drinking deck.
Right. And there were fireflies, which I had never seen west of the Mississippi on the Laramie River there. And so we spent a lot of hours after hard days on that deck, having a lot of fun.
But what advice would you give to a city slicker that's looking to invest in a ranch? What would you tell them?
I would tell them that it's a great investment as long as you're willing to hold on to a ranch for 10 years or more. Every time I've bought a ranch since, we've done very, very well. But I would say that they better have a second job because it's very difficult to make a lot of money in ranching. It's a difficult task.
Well, there's all the jokes, right? How do you make a small fortune in ranching? Start with a big fortune. And, behind every rancher is a wife that works in town. And, that second job's a good idea.
What inspired you to write 20 Miles of Fence?
Well, I'd kept a journal throughout the entire 10-year period. And my CFO at my architectural firm ended up becoming a writer. She retired. She'd had enough of managing crazy architects that don't know anything about business. And she ended up becoming an author. And she read my journals at the very end of owning the ranch up on the porch up there. And she said, there's a book in here. It took us 14 years to write it because we were so busy, each of us, her on her career, and I continued in architecture for another 10 years or so. And unfortunately, she died right after the book came out last March from a reoccurring cancer bout. And she was really credible woman and really good at wordsmithing. She's the reason this book is doing pretty well. It's her really writing skill. It's my experience. So that's really, I wrote it just to have people understand what it can be when you can totally switch direction in your life and do something different that makes you whole and brings you back to where you really belong.
Have you had some interesting feedback from readers?
Yes. The hard part is that she knew how to market the book. This is my first book, so I was a little newbie at that as well. And so the hard part is getting the book into someone's hands. Once they read it, the reviews are fantastic. I get people coming up to me all the time and say, boy, I read your book and I loved it. It's a different book that people would normally think of as a Western memoir, and people have really enjoyed it.
Do you do some active marketing on the book, or it's just doing what it's doing, or?
I do active marketing as much as I can do. I was on a radio station in New York City. That was interesting. I've been on several podcasts like this one, but it's hard because they don't know. CJ Box can put a book out and it's a bestseller, in about 5 days.
Just because it's him. Yeah, you're right.
That's been a challenge, but I'm very, very pleased with the book. And it really does give someone who's trying to maybe consider that lifestyle a real in-depth, no hold barred. There's humor, there's sadness, there's all kinds of different stories in there, and it's true. So people that read it really like it.
Where would somebody buy it?
You can get it almost anywhere. It's on Amazon. You can get it from the publisher, Bison Books. You can get it just by Googling it up, 20 Miles of Fence, Blueprint of a Cowboy, and you can get a hold of a copy.
And and we'll circle back to that at the end and wrap up with that. But what's next, Bob? I mean, you've had a successful book. You've got something next coming.
Yeah, I have a second book in process. I have to figure out exactly how to get it wordsmithed, whether I do that myself or I hire what they call a ghostwriter to help me. And, I've always done different things in life. I doubt I'll quit. I've always, even though I was an architect for 35 years, I was also a licensed bicycle racer, which was one of the craziest things I've ever done, as well as other things. So I don't have anything really planned, as my ranch is keeping me quite busy right now. I just put up 50 tons of hay myself,
Wow.
and it's small bale, so I keep quite busy. And of course, we're also running the Forks Mercantile and Saloon, which also is a pretty demanding process.
How far distant is that from the ranch?
4 miles.
I see.
And it's pretty fun. We bought it with some partners here in order to have a place for the community to come to. It had been in and out of bankruptcy. When it was closed, you never got to see your neighbors except for at the community hall, which is about every 3 or 4 months. So we made it into a place where you can see cowboy culture, only 24 miles from downtown Fort Collins. This area is really unique in Colorado. We still have cattle drives here. Very rare that close to the Front Range, where there's 3.5 to 4 million people now in the Front Range of Colorado. And so you come into the Mercantile and up in the bar, and we're 24/7 Cowboy channel. There's lots of cowboy hats. It's really fun to keep some of the Colorado Western culture alive in today's world.
A small community center is what you have now?
Yeah, we have a Livermore Community Center, which is about 2 miles down the road, where they have dances and some activities, but they're spread out. So every night, Friday and Saturday, all the locals show up at our restaurant.
Well, I was kind of meaning your restaurant is part of the community center. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I mean, it really lets people not have to drive to Fort Collins, which, isn't that far, but it's, 40 minutes, where they can have a good meal. We specialize in burgers, and they can get a cold beer, and lets people talk about the weather. As you know, cowboys do. It's never good, whether it's hot, too rainy, not enough rain. Have those discussions.
All true.
And it's become really important to the community. We've been open from our side for 5 years now, and it's quite popular.
I'll bet. If we're ever there, that's the perfect place.
To stop.
We love those kind of places. You got maybe a rancher or cowboy or cow college coming up, maybe? Is that something
Yes.
you're working on?
Yeah, so that's just a matter of finding the time to sit down and get the data together, because I want people to leave here with a good summary of what I've talked about. I went to a cow college at CSU after I owned the ranch up in Wheatland, and found it, even though I knew quite a bit about cattle after 10 years being on a 300 cattle ranch, I learned quite a bit. And so I've kind of taken off of that. Colorado State University put that on. And so I've kind of taken off on that, kind of simplified it. And I plan on just giving people tips to keep them out of trouble raising Highland cattle, which are different than raising Angus.
Well, my daughter-in-law is going to want to know when that's up and running, because she's just got to get cold weather ranch so she can get her beloved Highland cattle. And that's going to be at the inn at Whiskey Bell Ranch.
It is.
As soon as you get that up and running.
Yeah, well, that'll be the only time we'll be open is the weekends, and they'll
Right.
be scheduled weekends. We just we still can't stay open because the people stay in our house. And, we had people from all over the world, actually. And of course, with COVID, that was not good. So, and COVID's kind of, I heard, is rearing its head again. So we want to be really careful. as to when we have it. We'll probably have about 6 weekend sessions a year, and you'll get the full same attitude that we had with the B&B. The food is really good. The place is really pretty magnificent. You know, being an architect, I remodeled an 1894 ranch house, and it's a great place to be.
Yeah, no, I looked at it. It really is. So as we wrap up, where can they go? First of all, your book is going to be interesting to a lot of our listeners because it's right in their interest zone. 20 Miles of Fence, Blueprint of a Cowboy. That's available anywhere. Google it, et cetera, et cetera. How about getting in touch with you? Do they go to Inn at Whiskey Bell Ranch, or how do they find out about the cattle college, the Cowboy College?
Well, the best thing, our Whiskey Bell Ranch site is old, as you probably saw, since we shut it down a couple years ago. I will probably end up doing a new one. But right now, if you just go on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, you can go to Whiskey Bell Ranch, and there it is. That's where I'm going to advertise that. And you can go on Robert West for what I'm doing with the book and other things. So I have 2 different Facebook sites right now that I'm telling people what's going on. So
on Facebook, Robert West, and also a site at Whiskey Bell Ranch, or just Whiskey Bell Ranch?
It's just Whiskey Bell Ranch, and it covers my breeding. You can see some of the amazing animals we've produced. I have one of in my opinion, the 10 best bulls in the United States. And that's another story in another book.
Okay. Is that the next book, or that going to be the third
that's
book?
Part of it. Yeah,
okay.
That's part of it.
Well, they should just go and look at these Highland cattle, because, I was somewhere the other day, and they had pictures of Highland cattle all over. In just kind of a random place. So they are unique, and they are pretty fun to look at.
They're really distinctive.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. So thank you for your time, Bob, and we're going to try and get to your bar, your saloon and mercantile.
I'll be glad to buy you a beer.
Okay, then.
Are you there pretty often, Bob?
I'm there almost every weekend night because my partner is the manager. So if I want to see her, I'm there.
Okay. Now we know.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you so much for having me on. You have a great podcast.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, Cowboy gentlemen. We always enjoy your stories. Once again, this is Stan Houston, and the temperature in Tucson is beginning to get a little bit cooler. It's still pretty warm. It's still kind of a warm ride out there, but it will soon moderate, and it'll be just perfect for you to come. The snowbirds will soon be packing up, and they know that coming to Tucson is the right place and the right thing to do in these coming fall and winter months. So you should think about that too. Now, do you know that not only do we have at the White Stallion Ranch this wonderful program, the Cowboy Up Podcast, but the friends of Voices of the West, they oftentimes come out on a Saturday afternoon and put their program together. And then Saturday night, it's always usually David Rickner, the cowboy at heart, and that's what he is. And he has a podcast by the same name. He entertains the folks as they enjoy the Saturday evening Cowboy Chow Feast, and then relax around the music and stories of the cowboy experience. Yes, all of that happens at a place that is welcoming you right now. That's right. Russell and his family and all of the true family and friends welcome you to investigate White Stallion Ranch, the historic place for you to, again, have fun, family vacation, corporate retreat, and make it something very, very special. So check it out, whitestallion.com, whitestallion.com, and who knows, you might be here just in time to actually have a time to see the Cowboy Up Podcast live and in living color right where you are. I'm Stan Houston, wishing you all the best, and hopefully we'll see you at the ranch.
You know, Alan, what I know about Scottish Highland cattle is nothing really other than how they look. But I learned something today, and I think that maybe they're the English version of Spanish cattle criollo. And I think, you know, when you hear about these 99 plus natural calf birth rates, it's a sign to me that they've not been messed with by us. You know how we breed dogs for one attribute and get two negative ones? And we do that with cattle. We do it with horses. And I think when these breeds are pretty carefully left to be what nature created, you sometimes end up with a better result. You don't get this hyper fast growth rate. But you know, you came to our ranch, and this is now the criollo version. That ranch had been ranged with angus, the classic everybody wants to have right now. And you saw the lower part, and there wasn't a blade of grass. There was nothing. It was dirt and bushes.
Pretty bare, yeah.
It was pretty bare. You said, you bought this? And, you know, we got those angus off, put those criollo on, and they go up in the hills, and there was a lot of grass in the hills. And it kind of, and we got rain, which is the most important. And the range came back in about a year and a half. And not all the way back, but a long way back.
I'd like to see it again right now.
Yeah, we got to do it.
Yeah.
We've got to do it. But it's two things, rain and the cattle. Those angus would have just stayed on that flat ground and eaten it bare again. So.
Yeah, there's no question.
So I think these kind of things, you got to kind of think what kind of cattle for your ranch, and, you know, what can you take to retail? Because a small ranch, that's probably their best route to be successful enough to survive.
Same exact story, but different version is I had a scientist come out one time, a guy that knew what he was doing, and he looked at our breeding program, which was turn the bulls out, let the cows calve, and if they don't calve, they don't calve, you know, they die. And he said, well, you're so stupid you did something good. You bred in ease of calving to these cattle, but only by accident. And I guess he was right. I mean, I can't deny that. But good results, because, you know, we just didn't have any calving problems. But so by accident, once in a while, you do something good.
Perfect. That's when I'm at my best.
Well, folks, that's a wrap from the West, where cowboys are still making history. Hats off to Stan Houston's production company for bringing this episode to life. Want more cowboy stories? Ellen Day's collection, Cowboy Up, Life Lessons from Lazy Bee, is available from online booksellers. Be sure to tune in next week when talk turns to animals and those who care for them. Until then, I'm Lynn Weezy Sneed, reminding you to sit tall and ride safe.